Well guys, we got the Supra back in the shop and we're gonna be continuing the build. In the last video, we did get the car running and driving, but then we suffered a weird starting issue. So I do have the starter pulled off of this engine right now. So we're gonna start by replacing that, getting this thing, actually cranking over again, and then we have to do some other work too. This car had a weird underboost issue where we weren't seeing the full boost we were commanding out of the wastegate, which is 14 pounds. And it turns out that was just me. Had so much going on, I forgot to tighten this clamp. But I'm gonna be swapping out the wastegate anyway. I'm not sure how well you guys can see down here, but my steering shaft is right there. And the wastegate that I was running, which is a Turbosmart Hypergate 45, as you can see right here, this thing is like 4.5 inches tall. So we're gonna swap it out for a Hypergate 45 Lite, which is 1/2 inch shorter, and that should give us the clearance for the steering shaft to just not worry about it. And we might even be able to fit the factory heat shield. If the car wasn't right-hand drive, this wouldn't be a problem, but that is the story of this car. The right-hand drive aspect is why I bought it. I thought that was cool. It's also the issue with the car making everything hard to fit, but I think it'll be worth it. So here's the starter that came out of the car. This is the factory 1JZ starter, and a lot of guys will replace the contacts inside of the solenoids, but I think they're doing that on this kind of starter, which is a 2JZ starter. You can see that cap would come right off and you could do all that maintenance in there. Now, instead of doing that, I'm just going to install this 2JZ starter, which is a known good unit. The only difference is that the plug, the connector, is a little bit different, as you can see there, compared to the 1JZ one, which is just this spade. So we're going to just swap out this tired old unit and just use the 2J one. After all, this is a 2JZ block anyway, so we might as well just use a 2JZ starter. Now, in terms of testing that starter, what we need is this guy right here. This is a remote starter switch, and this will hook up to the solenoid and the main positive lug of that starter. We pull this trigger, and then it will spin the starter over. So let's go ahead and test both out. Testing starters is really easy. We have it grounded here. We're feeding it positive, all from a spare battery. And then we have our 2 leads hooked up for our remote starter on the solenoid. And when we pull the trigger, nothing happens. Now, you can't hear it, but this is making a little thunk sound. So it's trying to engage the starter, it's just not doing it. So now we have the 2JZ starter, and I'll go ahead and hook up this lead here to the solenoid trigger. And what you'll notice with this starter is when we pull the trigger, see how it's actually engaging the solenoid there? It's not spinning because our ground is probably bad, or one of our connections is bad. But let's go ahead and see if we can get this thing to engage. So there you go. This starter works great. That thing that's popping out like that's called like a Bendix or a Bendix, and that's what actually pops out, spins the flywheel, and starts the engine. So let's go ahead and get this thing installed. Surprisingly enough, at O'Reilly's, they do have this pigtail, which is the solenoid wire, of all things, for a Toyota. Didn't think they'd have that at a local auto parts store, but S2549 if you guys are looking to do the same thing. This is just a starter and no one's ever gonna see it, but man, things definitely look better when they're clean. I think that's good enough. It's a starter, come on. All right, so now we have access under the car. That little crossbar right here, we took that off so we had more room. The starter pigtail we have to modify is this guy right here. So we're gonna go ahead and snip this thing, crimp the new wire on, mount up the starter, and then we will be done. We can turn it over and make sure that it works. So this heat shrink butt connector came with this solenoid wire. We cut this basically to the same length of the one that we cut off the car. We're just going to shove our wire in here and give it a good crimp. And once it's crimped, we can, of course, then crimp it to the other end, and we will be done with the solenoid wire. Tug test. we're all good. It would have been way too hard to film up in here, but here we go. Heat shrink connector, or the heat shrink butt connector is on. Have our wire sheath. This will just go right over it, and then we will use this heat shrink down here to seal the wire sheath to the wire. Got the starter installed. We have our new solenoid connector plugged in. I installed a new little boot over this thing as well because the one that was on there was all torn up. The location of the starter lug and the solenoid wire on this starter they're in way better locations than the 1JZ one. The 1JZ one's on the front there, really hard to get to. So it's nice that the 2JZ one is right here. I'm absolutely dying in the shop right now. It is like 103 degrees in the shop. But before we let this thing off the lift and test out the starter, we got to install this Turbosmart Wastegate. The car already has a Hypergate 45 on it, but I wanted to run a Hypergate 45 Lite just because it is slightly smaller form factor, and I think it'll improve my clearance between the wastegate and the steering shaft. So that's why I picked this thing up. Let's check out the clearance compared to a Hypergate 45. Should be about ½ an inch shorter. So as you can see there, maybe we're 3/8 shorter than the full-size Hypergate 45. And overall, you can just tell this is a smaller wastegate. And these hold the same amount of pressure, they work the same. The biggest difference is that this diaphragm section on the Hypergate 45 Lite is obviously smaller, and these use the 38 and 40 millimeter springs, I believe. So a red spring, as you can see in there, is 14 pounds compared to a 45, the 14-pound spring is typically sky blue. So we got to get this thing installed, and we got to fab up a dump pipe for it because this one is from the previous setup and it's way too short. What's nice about the Turbosmart wastegates is that you can rotate and clock them so that you can have your different pressure ports in different locations. So depending on your turbo setup, manifold, and all that kind of stuff, these are always going to end up in different spots. So it's nice that you can loosen both this collar and of course this top collar to rotate things around and move them where you need them to be. Not my prettiest welds, but she'll hold. The wastegate's attached to this flange so that nothing warps. These V-bands warp really easy when you weld them. Moment of truth to see if this thing still fits after it's all welded up, because, you know, things like to move. Looks like we're good. Clamp that thing up and we'll have a brand new dump pipe. The old one, as you guys saw, where is that thing? The old one was really short, and they welded a 2 1/4 inch tube onto these 2-inch flanges, which is fine, but really short, really loud, and didn't fit the current setup. I mean, this is going to be loud too, but at least it'll dump all the fireballs towards the ground. There she is. Got a bunch of clearance from the manifold, clearance from the downpipe, and it just so happens that we also fit right into this little divot on that support bar right there, completely by chance. And there we go. We got our dump tube. I think I might cut it flat at an angle there so that it comes flat, but I also might just leave it because I don't think it really matters that much. So dump tube is done. Well, now we're gonna install a fuel pressure sensor. So we have to crimp on the new terminal ends in order to adapt it to this connector housing right here. I'll go ahead and show you guys how we're gonna do that. We have these little rubber boots, and these rubber boots will slide onto your wire first. So you're gonna just put it in there just like that. Once the boot is on, we're gonna strip the wire back, oh, maybe a 1/4 inch or so. Just like this. Then we're gonna use our crimpers to crimp on the terminal end. This is called an open barrel terminal. This open barrel terminal is going to crimp onto the wire. It's very easy, given you have the right tools. These are, I don't remember the exact pliers, but I'll put it on the screen here because it'll definitely save you a lot of time to have a nice set of crimpers for a job like this. Make sure everything's right, put our wire in here, and give it a nice crimp. Then what I do is I actually go a step down and I crimp it even tighter. Give it a nice little pull test. It's not going to come off. And at this point, we need to slide the little boot forward and crimp this guy on. And this is our finished product. And that'll go right into the back of that connector housing. And then we can wire in the new fuel pressure sensor to the ECU. The sensor is installed right here in the Aeromotive FPR. As you can see, we have our wire going into the cabin. And now we can go ahead and test if this thing works. One of the things that I wish I did when I built this 1JZ is use smart coils. You can see all the extra wiring that has to be there with the igniter and everything for those factory coils. They work fine, but I wish I would have put smart coils because it just cleans everything up. Anyway, let's go in the car and see if the sensor reads. Should work just fine. Can't really think of a reason why it wouldn't read unless we messed up the wiring. All right, so the fuel pressure gauge is right here, bottom corner. See if we get a number on the fuel pump prime. After everything reloads. Looks like we're good. We got 43.5 at the rail. So you can see here that the pressure is actually dropping because the rail is losing its pressure. But if we prime it again, we have pressure again, and now it's dropping back down. So the fuel pressure gauge is working. With the fuel pressure sensor done, I just pulled the plugs out so we could check those. This is the first time I've pulled these since the new engine has went into the car. So we have plug 1 here, plug 6 here. You can see they are all firing exactly the same. Maybe this one's a little teeny tiny bit different with the way that the electrode looks. But overall, I would classify these as normal in terms of how they look. Maybe a little, I was gonna say maybe a little lean, but actually I think everything looks pretty good here. So yeah, making progress. All that's left now is I need to get a boost controller installed and maybe a flex fuel sensor, and then we can go for another round of tuning. Well, I picked up a boost leak tester right here off of Amazon for way too much money. That was $60. You can just make that with a PVC cap, guys. Don't waste your money on this thing. But I thought my only boost leak was this coupler right here, but it turns out that I have another one right here with my cheap China SSQV where the snap ring goes. This is not putting enough positive pressure on the O-ring seal under there, and it's leaking all the boost out of this right here. If you take a listen, we're putting boost in it. That is a exceptionally bad leak. So a couple options here. Option 1 is we can get a genuine SSQV snap ring to seal that thing down. Option 2 is we can just weld that shut and put like a tile cue or something down on the charge pipe in that area where there's way more room, and it will sound a lot better than that there. I think for now, we might just block that off and run without a blow-off valve. I'm wrong. It's actually this coupler for blowing bubbles off this thing. See if we can tighten this thing up and get rid of that leak. Is it just loose? Did I not tighten this? All right, we got all the boost leaks fixed, so now we can go ahead and take this thing for a test drive. I have already test drove the car before, and I have taken it into boost, and it definitely has some good power and everything, but we can't like fully push it to redline yet because it's not like all the way broken in, and it's also not perfectly tuned to push 14 pounds, which is currently what's in the gate. But we can take it for a drive and make some cool noises. So let's go ahead and take this thing for a test drive. After I trip over my gas can, I also got the idle all fixed up. It was the idle air control valve had a problem where the stepper motor wasn't going the full range with the settings that I had it, so it just popped off the IACV and watched the little plunger inside and set the stepper range, and now it actually idles. It should, unless it wants to be shy on camera. Things we got to work out in the tune, of course, but listen to that engine. You have to remember we did build the engine, the transmission, we did the wiring, so there's a lot of stuff that all has to come together for this to run the way that it's running. And right now we're in third gear, we put it in fourth here, and yeah, all the gears are working. Everything's going really good with the transmission. To be honest, I was more worried about that than the engine. I've only rebuilt one engine or one transmission before, but I've done plenty of engines. So the transmission with all the upgrades in it and everything, and the twin disc clutch, I was a bit worried about that, but she runs pretty good. We can't fully go into boost because it's not tuned for 14 pounds. I've done it, and all the AFRs looks good, but I don't want to push it that hard if we're not tuned to be in that all the time. So man, it sounds really good though.